On vacation, my parents literally threw me out of my hotel room so my spoiled sister and her kids could take it. They told me to sleep anywhere or just fly home. Instead, I rented the most expensive penthouse. 3 days later, they regretted everything. My name is Danielle, and I'm the younger daughter, the one people remember when all the chairs at the table are already taken. Every Sunday, I drag myself to my parents' house in a cookie-cutter suburb just outside Chicago for family dinner. Lately, I've been running out of excuses not to go, so I just park my dented Toyota Corolla at the curb, take a deep breath, and ring the bell. As usual, my older sister Monica is already holding court in the living room. Her husband Brian hovers nearby while their kids, Sophie and Tyler, tear through the house like tiny tornadoes, taking out everything in their path. "Danny, you finally decided to show up," Mom calls out, barely glancing up from rearranging napkins on the table. No hug, no warmth, just a mild scolding, like I'm the late Uber Eats driver. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Dad." Dad gives me a brief nod, but he's busy locked in a passionate debate with Brian about the eternal rivalry between the Bears and the Packers. I hang my jacket and head toward the dining room just in time to hear Mom's voice flip into worship mode. "You should have heard what the teacher said at the conference," she gushes. "Sophie is reading 2 grade levels ahead, and Tyler's coach from that elite sports academy thinks he'll make the starting lineup next year." Monica soaks it in like a paper towel in a puddle. "Well, I do Kumon with Sophie every night," she says modestly, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "And I drive Tyler to extra practices 3 times a week. It's a lot, but what won't you do for your kids?" I sit down quietly. My presence barely registers. No one asks how my week was. No one asks about my job. No one ever does. What they don't know, and have never bothered to find out, is that 3 months ago, I pulled one of our biggest clients back from the edge of total collapse, got a fat bonus, and a promotion to senior project manager at a major tech company. The kind of salary that would make Brian choke on his craft beer. "Pass the potatoes, Danny," Monica says, giving me that look. The one that says, "Poor Danny. Still single. Still renting that sad little 1-bedroom. Still nobody." I pass the potatoes. Take a sip of wine. Another secret they don't know. A few weeks back, I asked my friend Kelsey, she works at a real estate agency and practically lives on Zillow, to help me find a place to buy. I'd finally saved enough for a down payment. With my new salary, a mortgage wasn't going to kill me. Why tell my family? Best case, they'd act like it was no big deal. Worst case, they'd find a way to make it about Monica. Somehow. So I kept my mouth shut. A month after that Sunday dinner, Kelsey called me sounding way too excited for a Tuesday. "I found it," she said. "Corner 2-bedroom, balcony, designer kitchen, new build, walking distance to the subway stop by the airport. You need to see it tonight." That evening I drove over and fell in love the second I walked in. Quartz countertops, big windows, actual sunlight, not the gray mush I get in my rental. "This is it, Kelsey," I said, running my hand along the island. "I'm taking it. Start the paperwork." 2 weeks later, I signed the mortgage. I was officially a homeowner. The feeling was unreal. Pride, accomplishment, freedom, all rolled into one. I thought about telling my parents, but decided to hold it until the next Sunday dinner. Just once, I wanted to share good news and have it actually land. When Sunday rolled around, I drove to my parents' place with my secret burning a hole in my chest. But the second I walked in, I knew something was off. The air was buzzing. Monica's kids were bouncing off the walls more than usual, and my parents were practically glowing. "What's the occasion?" I asked, hanging up my jacket. Mom and Dad exchanged conspiratorial looks.
"We've decided,"
Dad announced grandly.
"The whole family is going on vacation to Florida, a resort near the Gulf Coast. Can you get the time off?"
I paused. I hadn't had a real vacation in 2 years, and there were no urgent projects on my plate. "Yeah," I said. "I can take 2 weeks. Mom's face lit up. "Wonderful! The whole family together in Florida. It'll be magical." Her happiness caught me off guard. She actually seemed pleased I was coming. That was new, and for a moment I let myself feel included.
"We fly out in 2 weeks, Dad explained. "We've been planning for a while, but wanted to make sure everyone could go before announcing it."
I sat down. My news about the condo quietly slid to second place. A family vacation didn't sound so bad. Maybe away from the usual routine, they'd finally see me differently. Dinner continued with everyone talking over each other about Florida, what to pack, where to go, what to eat. My condo stayed my secret a little longer. The following Sunday, I showed up expecting more excited chatter about the trip. Instead, I walked into a funeral-level mood. Monica was slumped at the table, eyes puffy from crying. The kids were uncharacteristically quiet, doodling at the coffee table. "What happened?" I asked, setting my bag down. Mom and Dad exchanged worried glances. Monica sniffled dramatically before answering. "Brian and I had a huge fight," she said, voice shaking. "He refuses to pay for my ticket to Florida. Says I just sit at home and don't deserve a vacation." I bit my tongue to stop myself from pointing out that she literally does not lift a finger at home. Brian hired a housekeeper last year because housework gives Monica migraines. "So you're not going?" I clarified. Monica shook her head sadly. "Not unless Brian changes his mind. And he won't. He's stubborn as a mule."
"It's okay,"
Dad said, patting Mom's hand.
"We'll plan another family trip later. This won't be our last chance."
The rest of dinner dragged by in gloomy tones. Everyone took turns comforting Monica about her tyrant husband. I stayed quiet, feeling a strange mix of sympathy and irritation. On one hand, Brian shouldn't be controlling the entire family budget on his own. On the other, Monica really doesn't do anything. By the time I left, one thing was clear. Florida would be just me and my parents. 2 weeks later, I spent the evening before the trip in my old rental, packing. Most of my things were already moved into the new condo, but I'd left a few pieces at the old place so it still looked lived in. I still hadn't told my family I'd moved. I'd planned to surprise them after the vacation. The next morning, I met my parents at O'Hare. We checked in, boarded a Delta flight, and a couple of hours later landed in Tampa. Warm, salty air hit us the moment we stepped out of the plane. Despite my doubts about spending 10 days with my parents, I felt a little ripple of excitement. Our hotel was about a 20-minute drive from the airport. The kind of mid-range beachfront place with a decent pool and direct access to the sand. It was called the Pearl, because of course it was. At the front desk, a friendly young woman named Christina greeted us. "We're fully booked on standard rooms," she told me cheerfully. "You were lucky to reserve when you did. Right now we only have suites and penthouses open. Those are a different price point." "Got it. Thanks." I took my key card. My room was simple but clean. Queen bed, small balcony, shower. Exactly what I needed. I unpacked, changed into shorts and a tank top, and met my parents by the pool for cocktails. The first 2 days we explored the area, swam in the ocean, adjusted to a slower pace. And you know what? It was actually nice. Away from home, my parents seemed more relaxed, less obsessed with comparing me to Monica. I caught myself enjoying their company more than I had in years. On the 3rd day, everything went to hell. I was in my room, rubbing in sunscreen and getting ready for a lazy morning on the beach when someone started pounding on the door like the place was on fire. I opened it to find my parents with anxious faces. Behind them stood Monica, hair wild, eyes frantic, Sophie and Tyler clinging to her hands. "Monica?" I blurted. "What on earth are you doing here?" Monica collapsed theatrically onto my bed. "Brian and I are done," she declared. "We had a huge blow-up. I couldn't stand being in that house for another second, so I grabbed cash from his emergency stash and bought tickets for me and the kids." "You stole money from your husband?" I couldn't hide the shock. Monica shot me a death glare. "It's our money," she snapped. "Even if he manages it, I earned this vacation. And so did the kids." Mom nodded supportively. "Of course you did, honey. But where are you staying?" I glanced at their suitcases. "You booked a room, right?" Monica and my parents exchanged a look. "That's the thing," Monica said, her voice suddenly small. "The money only covered the flights. There wasn't enough left for a hotel. I thought maybe—" The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. Christina's words from check-in echoed in my head. All standard rooms fully booked. Only pricey suites left. "Exactly," Dad said, looking right at me with a calmness that made my skin crawl. The room went quiet. Everyone stared at me, expectant. Finally, Mom broke the silence. "Danny, you need to pack up your things." "What?" For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Mom sighed, as if she was explaining something deeply obvious. "Sweetheart, think logically. Monica has the kids. Your father and I are comfortable in our room. You're alone. It makes sense for you to give up your room so Monica and the children can stay there." I stared at her. "You're asking me to move out of my room," I repeated slowly. "So Monica, who arrived uninvited with no hotel money, can have it?" Mom's expression hardened. "Don't be selfish. You're one person. They're 3. You can find another place. Or fly home early. Or just sleep on the couch somewhere," Dad added, as if this was a perfectly reasonable suggestion. Monica looked around my room like she was already mentally redecorating. "There's plenty of space," she said. "Kids can sleep in the bed with me. I'm sure you'll figure something out, Danny." I laughed. I actually laughed. That hysterical, slightly unhinged laugh that slips out when reality takes a sharp left. Mom didn't find it funny. "Enough," she snapped. And then, to my absolute shock, she marched over to the closet, yanked out my suitcase, and started throwing my clothes into it. "Mom, stop!" I yelled, grabbing for the suitcase. She ignored me, stuffing my things in random piles. When the suitcase was full, she zipped it shut and rolled it into the hallway. "There," she said briskly. "Now Monica and the kids can settle in." I stood there, stunned. Monica was already telling Sophie and Tyler where to put their backpacks on the bed. Dad was collecting my toiletries from the bathroom into a plastic bag. I could have fought harder. I could have called the front desk and demanded they kick my family out. The room was in my name. I could have made a scene big enough that the hotel staff would still be telling the story to their grandkids. But standing there, looking at these people who were supposed to be my family, something inside me cracked, then solidified into something sharper, clearer. Without a word, I grabbed my purse and walked out, leaving my suitcase where Mom had shoved it in the hallway. Behind me, I could hear my parents and Monica already discussing who would sleep where. My first impulse was to book the next flight back to Chicago. But when I reached the front desk, a better idea started forming. I suddenly remembered what Christina had said about the suites and penthouses. She looked up when I approached. Her friendly smile faltered when she saw my face. "Ms. Danielle, is everything okay?" she asked. "Not really," I said honestly. "But we're about to fix that. You mentioned penthouses?" Her eyes widened slightly. "Yes, we do have a few," she said carefully. "But they're significantly more expensive than standard rooms." "How much?" She named a number that would have given me a heart attack 2 years ago. Now I didn't even blink. "I'll take your best one," I said. "Please." I followed the bellhop, who had collected my abandoned suitcase from the hallway outside my old room. We took a private elevator to the top floor. When he opened the door to my new place, I couldn't stop the small gasp. The penthouse was stunning. Spacious, elegantly furnished, with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the ocean. The living room flowed into a dining area and a fully equipped kitchen. Beyond that, a huge bedroom with a California king bed. I opened the complimentary bottle of California Chardonnay, poured myself a generous glass, and stepped out onto the terrace. The sun was sinking into the water, painting the sky in orange and pink. Leaning on the railing, I raised my glass. "To knowing your worth." I took a long drink. That night I slept like the dead, sprawled starfish style across the enormous bed with sheets that felt like clouds. In the morning I woke up to a gentle knock, room service bringing a complimentary breakfast. After eating on the terrace, I decided to head down to the beach. Crossing the lobby, I spotted my parents and Monica with the kids by the entrance. Judging by their outfits and general "we're suffering" vibe, they were heading out to find breakfast somewhere cheap. The hotel restaurant was clearly out of their budget now that they were paying for 2 rooms instead of 1. "Danny, there you are," Monica called, waving like we were just cousins who'd bumped into each other at a resort by accident. I walked over slowly, keeping my expression neutral. "So?" Mom asked with a smug little smile. "Where did you end up staying last night?" "Found another hotel," I said. Dad at least had the decency to look vaguely embarrassed. Before I could say anything else, Christina materialized at my elbow like a well-trained sorceress. "Ms. Danielle," she said, "I wanted to confirm your reservation for tonight. As one of our VIP guests, we've reserved the best spot for you on the beach." My family's expressions shifted from smug to stunned in under a second. "VIP guest?" Mom repeated. Christina beamed. "Yes. Ms. Danielle is staying in our premier penthouse, so she has access to all our exclusive services, including private dinners at our fine dining restaurant." She turned to me. "Will your family be joining you for lunch, Ms. Danielle?" Their faces were priceless. Monica's jaw dropped. Mom's eyes bulged. Dad looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. "No," I said calmly. "They won't be joining me." "Of course," Christina said smoothly. "Then I hope you all enjoy breakfast at Sunrise Buffet." She nodded politely at my family, referring to the cheap cafeteria 2 blocks away that every budget tourist flocked to. I gave my stunned relatives a casual little wave and headed to the beach, feeling lighter than I had in years. I spent the rest of the day enjoying every perk 5-star service could throw at me. I booked a massage at the spa, sprawled in a private cabana while staff brought me tropical drinks, swam in the ocean when the sun got too hot. I didn't think about my family once. That evening, I went back up to the penthouse to shower and change for dinner. The restaurant had a dress code, and I'd brought a little black dress specifically for a night like this. I was putting on earrings when someone knocked. Through the peephole, I saw the whole crew, parents, Monica, kids, all holding luggage. For a moment, I seriously considered pretending I wasn't home, but curiosity won. I opened the door, blocking the entrance with my body. "What do you want?" I asked. Mom didn't wait for an invitation. She squeezed past me into the penthouse. Dad, Monica, and the kids followed. "Wow," Monica breathed, spinning around slowly. "This place is amazing." Sophie immediately flopped onto the couch. Tyler pressed his face against the window. I stepped in front of them. "Out," I said. "Now." "Danny, don't be like that," Mom scolded. "We've checked out of our rooms. Monica and the kids left yours too. We'll all just stay here together. There's more than enough space." I almost laughed again. "No," I said, once I found my voice. "You're not staying here. This is my room. I'm paying for it. You're not welcome." Monica stepped forward, her voice oozing sugar. "Come on, Danny. Don't be selfish. Look at all this room. We're family." "Family?" I felt my temper spike. Family doesn't throw someone out of their hotel room. Family doesn't turn their vacation into someone else's problem. Family actually cares about your life and celebrates your wins. "This is ridiculous," Monica snapped. "We already checked out of the other rooms." "Sounds like a you problem," I said. To quote Dad from earlier, "Danny, be reasonable," Dad said. "We can make this work." "Or," I replied, picking up the room phone, "you can leave before I call security." "You wouldn't dare," Monica said. I dialed. "Front desk?" I said when they picked up. "I need security sent to my room to remove some unwanted guests." When I hung up, their righteous fury shifted to panic. "You're not serious," Mom whispered. "Completely serious," I said. "You need to go." "But where are we supposed to stay?" Monica's voice shook. "All the affordable rooms are booked." There was a knock. Christina arrived with 2 security guards. "Is there a problem, Ms. Danielle?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "These people need to leave my room and are refusing." Christina turned to my family. "I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to come with me," she said politely. "Wait," Mom blurted. "What about our old rooms? Can we go back?" Christina shook her head sympathetically. "I'm sorry, but as I explained at checkout, those rooms have already been assigned to new guests." As she led them out, Mom looked back over her shoulder. "This isn't over, Danielle." I closed the door without answering. On the terrace, my phone was buzzing nonstop. I finally picked it up. Text from Mom. "We're in a tiny roadside motel by the beach. 1 room for all 5 of us. The bathroom smells like mold. Hope you're happy." Text from Monica. "The kids are crying because the sheets are dirty. How can you do this to them?" I turned the phone off and set it aside. Their guilt trips might have worked once. Not anymore. For the first time in my life, I was responsible only for myself. And I was finally putting myself first. The rest of the vacation was bliss. I kept my phone off, checking it once a day in case of an actual emergency. The angry messages kept coming for 2 days, then suddenly stopped. Later I found out why. A hotel employee mentioned that my family had already flown home a couple of days earlier. Mom had left a message at the front desk. "We're going back home. Hope you're satisfied." I was more than satisfied. 2 weeks after I got back, I'd fully settled into my new condo and thrown myself into work. I channeled all the confidence I'd gained from standing up to my family straight into my job. I spoke up more in meetings, took on extra responsibilities. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was building something. One afternoon, my phone rang. Mom's number. I'd been expecting that call, but my stomach still tightened. "Hello? Danielle, where are you?" Mom's tone was accusatory right out of the gate. "We went to your old apartment and they said you don't live there anymore." "That's right," I said. "I moved." Silence. Then Mom's voice came back, suddenly syrupy and curious. "You moved? Where? Give us the address. We all need to sit down, talk, and make peace." In the background, I could hear Monica whispering furiously. "I bought a place," I said. "My own place. I've got a mortgage." On the other end of the line, there was a stunned pause and then a muffled exclamation. "You bought a condo?" Mom finally managed. "When? How?" 2 months ago. I got a promotion and a pretty big raise last year, plus a bonus for that major project. "Why didn't you tell us?" Her hurt sounded genuine. It didn't move me. "When exactly was I supposed to tell you?" I asked. "At Sunday dinners where you only talk about Monica? On vacation, when you kicked me out of my room?" Another long silence. "We need to meet and talk," Mom said at last. "Family shouldn't fight. What's the address? We'll come this weekend." I took a deep breath. "No, Mom," I said. "I'm not giving you the address, and I don't want to meet. I need time away from all of you." "Danielle," her voice sharpened, "we're your family. You can't just cut us off." "Actually," I said, "I can, and until you understand why your behavior was unacceptable, that's exactly what I'm going to do." I hung up before she could respond. My heart was pounding, but my resolve was steady. In the months that followed, my family tried everything to reestablish contact. They called, they texted, they even sent emails to my work account. Some messages were furious, some were pleading, some were pure manipulation. I deleted most of them without finishing. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard that Monica and Brian's marriage was in serious trouble. The Florida incident had been the last straw. Now they were on the brink of divorce. I felt a flicker of pity for the kids. Then I reminded myself, Monica's choices are not my responsibility. I kept paying my mortgage, kept growing in my career, kept enjoying the quiet of my own space. A life finally built around my needs, not their expectations. They'd made it clear there was no room for me in the family unless I came last. So I stopped applying for a seat at their table, and for the first time in my life, I pulled up a chair for myself. So what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more. That night, the police were sure a father was beating his daughter. I was sure he was the only chance she had. It all started way less dramatic. 3 a.m, the smell of fried bacon baked into my skin, and my one true wish in life, to get home and faceplant into my pillow. I'm Mia, 31, waitress in a 24-hour diner on the edge of Oak Ridge. Yes, I've got a degree in child psychology. Yes, I work where people think refill is a personality trait. This is America, honey. Dreams are financed by student loans and double shifts. I'd already turned into the alley between the car wash and an old brick building when I heard someone sniffle. Honestly, my first thought was, please, not another drunk college kid. I was already mentally switching into calm voice mode and preparing to call an Uber and an ambulance when in the weak streetlight I saw that this was not a college kid. It was a child. Little girl, maybe 5 or 6. Pink hoodie, hair down, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at me with eyes like a terrified animal. Clean sneakers, decent clothes, and absolutely alone. Hey! I crouched down, trying not to look like a kidnapper. Hi, are you lost? She flinched, hunched her shoulders, and wrapped herself tighter. Not a word, just breathing, way too fast for a body that small. Somewhere deep inside me, something clicked in a bad way. That familiar cold in your chest when you're little again. Your drunk mom is screaming behind the door, and you're trying to breathe so quietly she forgets you exist. That's the cosmic joke. People who most wanted to be invisible as kids grow up and run straight into let me help everyone professions. Some become doctors, some social workers. I picked therapy. On paper. In reality, I was standing in an alley with a stranger's kid who smelled like fear and asphalt. Look, it's chilly out here, I said, more businesslike now. How about we at least stand up? My diner's right on the corner. It's bright, it's warm, they have hot chocolate. I won't touch you if you don't want that, okay? Nothing. Her fingers just got whiter on that hoodie. I automatically scanned around us. Empty. No adults. No cars. Windows dark. That special moment when you realize, yeah, you're the adult, and you either step in or spend the rest of your life replaying how you walked away. I sighed and pulled out my phone. First person I dialed was Tessa. Tess is my friend and the official adult in Adult World. Licensed clinical social worker with local child protective services. In other words, the person who sees this kind of kid every day, and this kind of mom, like mine. Mia? Her voice came through sleepy, but the kind of sleepy that can snap awake in half a second. You know what time it is? 3:07. Listen, I found a kid in an alley. Little girl, maybe 5, alone, scared out of her mind. Not talking. The pause went ice cold. Did you already call 911? I called you first, I admitted, hearing how dumb it sounded as I said it. She's sitting on the ground. She's shaking. I don't want to leave her alone. Mia. Tess switched to the tone she uses for especially stubborn officials. Right now you're split between your childhood trauma and the criminal code. You take that kid somewhere bright, you stay with her, and you call 911. Tell them you're willing to be a support person until CPS gets there. I'll wake up our on-call social worker and probably a detective. And Mia, don't disappear before they arrive. I'm not the disappearing type, I muttered. You know that. Exactly why I love you. Call 911. She hung up. Perfect. I hung up too, on my hope of just minding my own business. I looked back at the girl. Okay, kiddo, I'm about to do something very loud and official, I said, lifting my phone. But I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere, okay? She didn't answer, but when I slowly held out my hand, after a long hesitation, she did stand up, very carefully, like any movement might blow something up. We made it to the corner. The Sunrise Diner neon glowed over an empty parking lot. Through the glass I could see our cook, Marco, scrubbing the grill, and Olivia, the other waitress, taping extra hard on the tip jar. I sat the girl down in the back booth, the one we save for breakups and people who cry on the phone. I called 911 and went down the list. Location, approximate age, alone, not talking, looks scared, possible bruises. The dispatcher confirmed the address, asked me not to leave and not to grill the kid for info about her house parents. It was kind of funny. We all know the phrase trauma-informed from TikTok and then immediately forget kids don't need a full interrogation from every adult in the vicinity. "I'm gonna grab you some hot chocolate," I told the girl when I hung up. "If you don't like hot chocolate, I'm still bringing it." She gave the tiniest nod, almost invisible. Olivia lifted an eyebrow when she saw us. "Who's that?" "Santa hit the wrong address," I said through my teeth. "I called 911. CPS is on it. Can you make me a kid-size something hot and very sugary?" "Sure." Olivia glanced at the girl, her face softening. "Oh, God." When the girl reached for the mug, her sleeve slid back, and I saw it. A bruise, yellow-blue, like a bad watercolor of a continent covering half her forearm. Not a bike fall bruise, more like somebody held onto her very hard, and it had nothing to do with hugs. My stomach twisted. "Hey," I said gently, "can I give you a different sweatshirt? I've got a spare in my locker. This one's kinda dirty at the bottom." It actually wasn't too bad, but I needed to see the rest, and so would the doctors. In the employee restroom, I pulled my old black diner sweatshirt out of my locker. The girl stood in the middle of the room, frozen. "I'm not going to touch you without permission," I said, mentally reciting the manual. "You can take off your hoodie yourself and put this on. I'll just set it on the sink, okay?" She nodded. Slowly took off the hoodie. I tried very hard to breathe evenly. Her stomach, ribs, shoulder, covered in shadows. Different colors, different stages of healing. Somebody big had been signing their name on that small body. Not with fists, palms, belt, something wide. And I knew that handwriting. My mom's name was Nicole. Her favorite parenting tools were a bottle and a belt. Our trailer burned down when I was 9. Neighbor Pete dragged me out through a window while the fire trucks were still on their way. Nicole didn't get to drag herself out that time. That's how I learned the world can hurt you and save you at the same time. 2 months later, my grandma on my dad's side showed up, Claudia. She took me to New York, to a therapist, to real food, to sheets that didn't smell like cigarettes. I spent years learning how to breathe without counting the steps to the door. My therapist said I'd make a great child psychologist. You'll understand them from the inside. Funny how right he was. In theory. In practice, I turned into a night shift waitress because the system where I was supposed to save kids turned out to be one giant air quote. The girl pulled on my sweatshirt. It was a little big, but that was better. Covered almost everything. "Perfect," I said, even though everything inside me was screaming. "Let's go. We're about to be visited by some people with flashing lights." The cops showed up about 10 minutes later. 10 minutes is forever when you're a scared kid. For a waitress on shift, it's 2 broken glasses and 1 argument with a customer about whether sauce is included. 2 officers, a man and a woman, came in wearing that expression I know from miles away. "We have no idea what we're walking into, but we're already braced for the worst." "You the one who called?" the woman asked. "Yeah." I nodded toward the girl. "Found her alone in the alley? She's not talking. She's clinging to me like I'm the last safe object in the universe." The girl had already grabbed a fistful of my sweatshirt. "We've got an ambulance on the way," the male officer said. "They'll check her out. You can ride with her if she clearly doesn't want to let you go. You'll have to answer some questions at the station later." "I love answering questions," I said dryly. "I even got a degree for that." The ambulance pulled up right after the cops. A paramedic, a woman with soft eyes, crouched down to the girl's level. "Hey, sweetie. My name's Kate. I'm just gonna make sure you're okay, all right? And your, friend?" She looked at me. "Mia," I said. "I found her." "Mia can ride with you if you want," Kate told the girl. "She can stay right by you." The girl's grip on my sleeve tightened. That was an answer. They took us to the children's wing of the city hospital. A few more adults joined the party, pediatrician, nurse, and a woman in a sensible but warm cardigan, a social worker. About half an hour later, a new figure appeared in the doorway. Guy in a blazer without a tie, tired face. Detective.
Detective Miller.
He flashed his badge. Oak Ridge PD. Mia, I introduced myself. Waitress and part-time emotional support animal. The social worker, Sarah, let out a tiny snort. The detective did not.
She hasn't said a word?
He asked. One nod, two sighs, and one attempt to climb into my ribcage, I said. But hey, that's progress. We've already put her info in the missing kids system, Sarah said. And she looked at me. Your name is familiar. You're friends with Tessa Anderson? If she still calls me that, then yeah, I said. She also asked me to tell you this wasn't her fault. Tessa's already looped in, Sarah nodded. She's on her way here. The doctor finished his initial exam and asked me to stay close while they did a few scans and blood work. The girl, still nameless on the chart, held my hand like I was the only anchor in this bright, white, too loud world. Hey, I said quietly when we were finally left alone for a minute. You know your name. I'm sure you do. If you tell it to me, I'll call you by it. If not, I'm gonna call you Sunshine, and in America that sounds kinda weird sometimes. She was silent for a long time. Then she whispered so softly I almost missed it. Kristen? Hi, Kristen, I said. I'm Mia. We've already met, but you kinda skipped introductions. For a moment, the corner of her mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. Sarah came back with a sheet of paper and a box of markers. Kristen, she said gently, sometimes it's easier for kids to draw than to talk. If you want, you can draw what's going on with you, how you feel. It doesn't have to be pretty, just how it is. Kristen looked at me like asking for permission. I nodded. She took a marker. Her fingers still shook, but the lines on the page were steady. First, she drew a little girl, stick legs, circle head. Then, towering over her, a huge woman with crooked teeth and green hair. Over her head, Kristen scribbled a sort of crown and wrote in messy kid letters, Witch. Next to the witch, she drew a tall man without a face, holding something black. Farther away, off to the side, she drew a figure on a horse. Underneath, Dad. I didn't need to be a practicing therapist to read that. You're very brave, I said quietly. That's a really clear picture. I handed the paper to Sarah. She exchanged a look with Miller. So, we're looking for a witch and the boyfriend, Miller said darkly. And a dad on a horse. He's obviously not in the same category as the first two, I pointed out. If he was a threat, he'd be standing next to the witch, not riding in from afar. Miller looked at me like I'd just started reading his mind. You're a psychologist? He asked. On paper. In reality, I carry trays and argue with people about the doneness of their steak, I said. But yeah, I remember the basics. He sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. All right. Let's hope the dad on a horse exists outside the drawing. About 15 minutes later, he came back with a different look on his face, somewhere between tense and relieved. We've got an Ethan Cole, he said. Reported his 6-year-old daughter, Kristen, missing 3 hours ago. Full custody. Mother, Margaret, had her parental rights terminated for physical abuse and neglect. We've got reports, photos, court records. They were driving from Texas to New York, stopped near Oak Ridge for the night. In the motel parking lot, the girl ran after a cat. He looked away for a second. You know the rest. He's on his way. I felt something unclench inside me. You still looking at him as a suspect? I asked. For now, yes, Miller said honestly,
As long as I'm staring at a kid covered in bruises, I don't get to close the suspect list. But, he glanced at the drawing, this does change the angle. Ethan Cole showed up 20 minutes later, tall, dark-haired, unshaven, in a wrinkled t-shirt. The standard look for a man who's spent too many hours behind the wheel and in a police station. They brought him in through a different door, into a separate room. I only saw him through the glass, a guy pacing like a caged animal, gripping his phone, with a lawyer somewhere on speaker, while the detective ran his standard script. Kristen was in the playroom with me, with the drawing and a generic hospital teddy bear. Sarah had told her dad was here, but people with notebooks had to talk to him first. They always talk first, Kristen whispered. Then Dad gets mad. You think he's mad at you? I asked. She shook her head. At them. That was actually good news. After a while, the door opened again. Sarah peeked in. Kristen, she said gently, your dad's here. Do you want to see him? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. She launched herself out of the room. I stood up to follow. Ethan had just enough time to look up before a small missile in my black sweatshirt hit him at about 25 miles an hour. She wrapped herself around him like she never planned to let go again. He froze. Then his arms snapped shut around her, and he buried his face in her hair. I'm not a big fan of words like abyss, but whatever flashed across his face for a second looked a lot like one. Hey, Peanut, he breathed. God, I thought... His voice cracked. Miller stood nearby pretending this was just another item on his checklist. It wasn't working. Ethan, he reminded him, we still need to finish our conversation. I'll do whatever you want, Ethan rasped, still holding on. Just, please don't take her away. Kristen clung harder. Sarah stepped in. Okay, she said in that trained, calm voice. Here's what we're going to do. Ethan, you come with me and Detective Miller to the office and we finish up. Kristen stays here with Mia, who, she glanced at me, is officially a support person. No foster placement tonight, unless we get a reason to consider you a threat. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., both of you come to my office. Got it? Ethan nodded. Kristen's fingers dug into his shirt. I'm not going anywhere, I told her. I'll be right here waiting while you're with them. Promise. She looked up at me, then at her dad, then back at me. You'll come with us? She asked. As far as the law will let me, I said, which was the only honest answer. Miller and Sarah took Ethan to the office. Kristen came back to the playroom with me. She sort of played with plastic animals, but stayed closer to me than my own shadow. About 40 minutes later, the door opened again. This time, Ethan looked no better, but calmer, the kind of calm people get when they've run out of emotional fuel. We're done for tonight, Miller said. They're going home. Home, in his mouth, meant motel. Or wherever. Sarah added, Ethan, you've got full custody, confirmed by the court. CPS sees no reason to place Kristen in foster care tonight, as long as you stay in contact, cooperate, and show up tomorrow. She turned to me. And Mia, officially, we can't make you do anything. Unofficially, Kristen has made it very clear she feels safe with you. If you're able to spend the night with them, that would help. At that point, my brain started flipping through my internal schedule. Shifts, bills, the size of my couch. Somewhere on the page where my internal code lives, there's been a line for years. If a kid is terrified, deal with everything else later. I've got a 1-bedroom, I said. 1 decent mattress and 1 IKEA couch that's seen more drama than most therapists. I can give them my bed. Ethan looked at me like I'd just offered not lodging, but a new universe. Are you sure? He asked. You don't even know me. I know how your kid ran to you, I said. That's enough for one night. My apartment is on the 3rd floor of an old building where everything creaks,
but at least nobody throws parties on Wednesday at 3 a.m. Inside, it's the usual used couch, wobbly kitchen table, and a cat named Tiger I rescued off a supermarket parking lot. Tiger strutted out to meet us, tail straight up, like he owned the deed to the place. "This is how it started," Ethan muttered when Kristen, seeing the cat, finally let go of him for a second and followed the striped tail. "She saw a huge orange cat in the parking lot and decided the world is a safe place where you can run after cats," I finished. "Terrible, really." We tucked Kristen into my bed. I found an old college t-shirt for her, Future of Psychology printed across the front, which really tied the night together, irony-wise. Ethan took a shower, and then we sat in my kitchen with cheap tea bags and discount cookies. "Margaret wasn't always a monster," he started without any warm-up. At first everyone's normal. Or good at pretending." I nodded. I knew. He told me his story, how he fell in love with a girl with sad eyes and too loud laughter who grew up with an alcoholic mom and swore she'd never be like that. How the first year after Kristen was born was almost okay, how slowly the bottle showed up in their kitchen again. Evenings. Then to relax. Then always. "I was working 12-hour shifts," he said. "I'd come home and not understand why my kid had bruises. She'd say, 'I fell.' Then I started noticing she flinched when her mother came near. I called CPS. They came, talked to Margaret. She cried, promised she'd fix everything. You know that script." I did. The "I'll change" speech is the favorite genre of people who don't change anything. "Then there was a night the neighbor called the police," Ethan went on. "Margaret threw Kristen on the floor. CPS took her into emergency foster care. I spent 3 months in court proving I wasn't the same as her. Eventually, the judge terminated Margaret's rights, gave me full custody, but Kristen stopped talking. She just shut down. We started therapy. I found a clinic in New York that said they could help. I quit my job in Texas, we packed the car, started driving across half the country. And in some crappy parking lot, I got distracted by a screaming text from my boss, looked away for 30 seconds, and when I turned back, she was gone." He went quiet. The kitchen felt very small. Somewhere in the living room, Tiger was knocking something over. "You did what a lot of people never do," I said. "You called CPS. You went to court. You took your kid out of there. Most guys in your shoes keep pretending they don't know what's going on at home." "Tell that to the detective," Ethan snorted. "All he saw in my eyes was another dad taking it out on his kid." "They've been burned too," I shrugged. "Otherwise, they wouldn't work that job. We've all got our scars." I could have told him about Nicole, about the trailer, about Pete, about how Grandma Claudia drove me to New York and my first therapist taught me that crying isn't weakness, it's a biological function. But the night was already overloaded with someone else's pain. "What about you?" he asked. "You clearly know what you're doing. Why aren't you in an office like Sarah's?" "I tried," I said. "Worked at a school, at a clinic. Everywhere, I was writing reports more than listening to kids. I realized I was documenting trauma more than helping anyone through it. So I went where expectations are honest. In a restaurant, people want coffee, a steak, and for you not to forget their sauce. Nobody pretends you can fix the whole system." "Well, tonight you fixed something very real," he said. "If it wasn't for you." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. We sat at my tiny kitchen table, 2 adults with shattered illusions, drinking cheap tea from mismatched mugs. The schedule for my shifts was pinned to the wall, my electric bill lay on the table, and in the next room a 6-year-old who'd seen way too much in her life was sleeping soundly. And somehow, it all felt right. Kristen woke up the next morning glued to both of us, one hand on me, one on her dad. We went to CPS like we'd promised. Sarah asked another dozen questions, wrote up a safety plan, noted that Kristen was clearly attached to both adults, shows signs of trauma but also strong recovery potential. Yeah, I read reports automatically. Occupational hazard. Then my regular life snapped back. Night shifts, coffee, people arguing about an $8 bill like their mortgage depended on it. For a while, the whole Kristen situation felt like some weird dream. Until exactly a week later, in the middle of the dinner rush, the door opened and I saw them. He was in a clean button-down, actually rested, still tired around the eyes but without that abyss. She was in a light blue dress with neat braids and a wristband hiding the last of the old bruises, and a smile. A real one. "Got a family reunion out front," Olivia murmured behind my shoulder. "You taking that table?" I was already walking. Kristen saw me first. For a second, she stared like she wasn't sure I was real, then launched herself at me just like she had at her dad that night. "Mia!" Her voice was louder than anything I'd heard from her in the hospital. "I missed you!" If you want to know the weirdest feeling in the world, it's this. A kid who went through all of that telling you she missed you. Not her therapist, not a doctor, not a social worker. A waitress at a cheap diner. "I missed you too," I said honestly, hugging her back. Ethan walked over a little slower, carefully, like grown-ups do when they're afraid to spook something fragile. "We're moving to New York next week," he said. "Clinic agreed to take Kristen into their program. I already found a job. But before that," he hesitated. "We wanted to stop by and say thank you." "Our coffee still sucks," I said. "So this is a bold move." He smiled. "Kristen wanted to show you something," he said. She didn't wait for a cue. She pulled a sheet of paper from her backpack. Another drawing. Same little girl. Same horse. Dad. And another figure, standing next to the horse, in jeans with a ponytail. Over that figure, in bumpy kid letters, it said Mia. "Now the prince has a helper," Kristen said seriously. "And the witch." She paused, thinking. "The witch has a problem now." I felt my throat tighten. This is where I really regret not being the kind of therapist who can say something beautifully profound. I only know how to bring people coffee and sometimes stay when everyone else leaves. "Sounds like a fair universe," I said. Ethan took a breath like he was about to jump into cold water. "We were thinking," he started. "We don't know anyone in New York. Kristen doesn't have anyone except me. And you," he looked straight at me, "you don't owe us anything. But if you ever get tired of arguing over stakes, you've got the degree, you've got the gift, and you've got a little girl who thinks you're her rescuer." He stopped, like he'd scared himself with his own boldness. "And you're offering me what exactly?" I asked. "To move to New York, dive back into the system, and do part-time fairy godmother duty for your princess? I'm offering you..." He lost the thread for a second. "I'm offering you a chance to think about it. And maybe one day walk into that clinic not carrying a tray, but wearing a badge that says Mia Cole, child psychologist." I snorted. "Hold up. Cole? I'm not saying tomorrow," he said quickly. "Or ever. He spread his hands helplessly. Sometimes you find someone in an alley. Sometimes in a station. Sometimes behind a counter like this." I didn't have a ready-made answer. Not as a therapist, not as a waitress, not as a person who still counts how many steps to the exit. I just took the pencil from his hand, and under Kristen's drawing I wrote, "See you in New York." Kristen studied the words carefully. "You're gonna come?" she asked. I looked at Ethan, at her, at my counter, at the ticket line hanging in the kitchen window. "I can promise you one thing. I'm never walking past when it comes to your story again. The rest? We'll see." She nodded, satisfied. Like that was the best contract she'd ever signed. If you made it all the way here and you're still waiting for a moral, here it is. Sometimes the system isn't abstract CPS, courts, detectives, and clinics. Sometimes the system is a waitress who doesn't walk past a kid in an alley at 3 a.m., a detective who actually looks at a crayon drawing, a social worker who doesn't send a child to foster care on autopilot, a father who refuses to pretend he doesn't see bruises. Each of us is one tiny gear in this weird machine called life in America. And sometimes you're the gear that keeps someone else from finally coming apart. Now your turn. What would you do if you found a kid alone in an alley at night, covered in bruises and not saying a word? Tell me in the comments. And yeah, if you ever see a waitress named Mia in New York, don't forget to tip her well.